Today we are going to listen to what Professor Donald Dorr has to tell us about the higher education in Great Britain. Instead of the program scheduled regularly at this time, today we are going to listen to an interview with Professor Donald Dorr of the University of Sussex in Great Britain, who recently visited here in Japan. The interviewer is Mr. Masao Kunihiro. Professor Dorr is considered to be one of the most outstanding students of Japan, the Japanese society, and of the Japanese people. He is the author of some outstanding books on urban life in Tokyo, on the state of education in the Edo era, and also on the agrarian reform which was put into effect in Japan after the war. He currently holds the position of research professor at the Development Research Center of the University of Sussex. The University of Sussex, as many of you might know, is one of the most outstanding and innovative institutions in the area of higher education and research in that country.
Professor Dorr, I'd like to ask you this question in the very first place, and that is, in what circumstances did you begin to interest yourself in or involve yourself with Japan?
It was the first of a long series of accidents that's brought me here, entirely unintended. I responded in 1942 to a circular by the British Ministry of Education offering to teach people exotic languages in order to become interpreters for the Army and the Navy. And we were all selected together, and when we arrived at the place which was designated, we were offered the choice of learning Turkish or Persian or Chinese or Japanese. And I chose Turkish because I at least knew where Turkey was. And I was told that I was doing Japanese. That's how I started. The interest came later. I think it was a very, very lucky accident, actually.
Yes, I think it was a very lucky accident for us.
For me,
perhaps more
for me.
For us than for you, Professor Dorr. Now, Professor Dorr, what brought you here to Japan this time?
This time I came to give a couple of lectures and to see friends and catch up on the latest developments in Japanese sociology, Japanese society, Japanese politics, and also to meet people who are interested in problems of third world development. Since at the moment I am working at an institute at the University of Sussex, the Institute of Development Studies, which is concerned with the problems primarily of economic development, but also of social and political development in the poor countries of the third world. I've been there for the last 4 years, not because Japan was thought to be a third world country in need of development, but because I'd spent the last 20 years of my life studying Japan, studying the changes in Japanese society and economy over the last century. And the idea was that somebody who'd spent his life doing that kind of thing ought to have some ideas about development that wouldn't occur to people whose only acquaintance with the process of development was with the development of Europe or North America. So the question I'm constantly asked is, how far can Japan provide a model of development for the countries of the third world? It's a very difficult question to answer, of course, and one that one cannot give an overall answer to. There are certain respects in which Japan, the approaches to development problems by the Japanese government in the Meiji period can be of interest and of value for the developing countries today. For example, the emphasis which was put on agricultural development as well as on industrial development.
Of course, you have been interested very much in the problem of development, and in the process of development of any national entity, education, particularly at the primary level, assumes a very important role.
Yes.
And of course, you are not only the author of a monumental work on the state of education in the Tokugawa period, but also you were one of the members of the OECD review team on education. So I would like to ask several questions about education, particularly in the United Kingdom today, centering around the so-called new universities. And since you have been connected with one of the new universities, the University of Sussex, I would appreciate it a great deal if you would tell us a little bit about the concept of the new university to start with, and later more specifically about the University of Sussex. What are the characteristics or most outstanding features of the University of Sussex as contrasted with some of the older institutions of higher learning such as Oxford, Cambridge and so on?
The features, the chief feature of Sussex in particular among the new universities was that it tried to get away from the established disciplines. It tried to produce courses which were not conventional courses in history or in economics, but which gave students a broader outlook on the world. Somebody said they tried redrawing the frontiers on the intellectual map. And to a certain degree, I think they've succeeded. There's always the problem when you do this, that you draw the frontiers too loosely and you have too large a unit, so that even if a student studies for 4 years, he still doesn't go deeply enough into any one subject to be challenged by the need for intellectual rigor. It ends up as what is called in England a waffle subject. And that is a very considerable danger, but I think Sussex hasn't done too badly in getting away from that.
I see.
Because, see, there are two things involved in waffling, in the distinction between waffle and rigor. One is the question of whether or not the subject matter is intrinsically intellectually difficult. Now, mathematical economics is intrinsically difficult in the sense that there is a lot that you cannot understand until you have gone through a long process, of building up your mathematical skills, through differential calculus and integral calculus and so on and so forth. Now that takes some time, and by and large in most populations, there's not more than 10% of the population or 15% or 20% of the population who can master the techniques sufficiently well to understand it. Now, if your subject as physics, chemistry, mathematics, and mathematical economics, and the more abstruse bits of mathematical sociology, if your subject is of this kind, then rigor is guaranteed by difficulty. But you see, most of the policy sciences are not of this kind. Most of the issues which are discussed in practical economics, in sociological theory and so on, are issues the nature of which it is possible to understand fairly completely with a very small amount of preparatory training. And consequently, to demonstrate that this is not a waffle subject, that it is a really genuinely rigorous subject, requires subjective judgments of the quality of arguments, of the closeness of the logic with which people argue. Because this is a subjective judgment. Whereas with mathematical economics, you can point out whether a train of reasoning is logically correct or incorrect, and you can point exactly to the point where it is incorrect. But in the social sciences, when you're dealing with practical matters, there is such a mixture of evaluative judgments and factual judgments and logical argument that to say that this argument is correct and this one is incorrect is an impossible judgment. And it's very, very difficult in those fields to avoid waffle and to ensure rigor in the teaching. It depends very much on the intellectual quality and, of course, on the conscientiousness of the teachers and of the students. Anyway, the major innovation in Sussex was in this way to develop courses, for example, in the economy, which are not, all Adam Smith and Ricardo and Marshall and Marx, but which include a good deal of sociological study of the nature of management, for example, which include also some philosophical discussion of the nature of value, what values are and the way in which they're determined by social history and the norms of a society, the way in which reference groups determine consumption patterns, and to bring these aspects of economic life into the mainline study of economics. I think it's succeeded reasonably well in that. The other innovation isn't really an innovation at all. It is to use fewer lectures and to rely much more on giving students fairly substantial reading lists, carefully selected reading lists, have them read, spend most of their time reading, write their own appreciations and criticisms of what they read, and discuss these in structured tutorials in groups of 10 or a dozen people.
I see.
Sometimes in groups of 2 or 3. Now this, of course, is a very expensive way of teaching. Very expensive way of teaching. I forget what the student-teacher ratio is at Sussex now. I think it's about 13 to 1 overall. In some departments, it's down to 8 or 9 to 1. That, as I say, isn't really an innovation. It is a return to the teaching methods of Oxford and Cambridge, which had been perforce abandoned at most of the later foundations, simply because they had to process more students, and the lecture is a more economical means of doing so. I'm not sure how far that's worked. I think it works reasonably well, but there is very considerable difference, of course, between teachers. It means that if you've got 300 students who are doing the basic course in British society, there are 30 teachers. Now, you cannot ensure homogeneous quality of teachers, and some are good and some are not so good. And from the point of view of the student, it is something of a lottery. But I think on the whole it's been fairly successful.
Well, Professor Doe, I personally cannot help but admire the United Kingdom very much indeed, for various reasons, but primarily on the following 2 accounts. In the first place, the United Kingdom has done a great deal in the area of higher education since the end of the war. And secondly, I think your country has done so well in the area of environmental protection, or the prevention of further environmental degradation. And at the end of the war, of course, your country gave up the idea of remaining a superpower once and for all. And I think that your country has addressed itself very briskly to these 2 areas, problem areas, which I think are 2 of the several major problem areas which confront the so-called advanced industrialized part of the world. And for these two reasons, I can never cease to be amazed at the ingenuity and insight or foresight with which your countrymen and government decided to devote your energies and so on to these two important problem areas. And it is my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that in the area of higher education, the United Kingdom is more of a meritocratic society than it used to be. In other words, higher education is no longer a monopoly of the upper class or upper middle class of British or British society rather. And it is also my understanding that many of the students at Sussex or at Cambridge and Oxford are now university students thanks to very extensive and generous scholarship aid programs of the government. Am I right in so understanding?
Yes, absolutely right. It's nice of you to be so appreciative of Britain's higher education. I'm not sure that it really deserves much praise. But in that respect, in the sense that there is a fair degree of equality of opportunity to enter the university now, you're absolutely right. The use of state resources, of state finance, to provide complete bursaries which make it possible for children to have even an Oxford or Cambridge education at no expense to their parents, has been gradually expanded over the last 25 years. It's a remarkable contrast, incidentally, to the situation in Britain, where in Japan, where the Ministry of Education could announce yesterday that it proposed to give an increasing amount of support to private secondary schools and higher schools, which of course are used by the middle classes. And nobody, I haven't heard that the Japan Teachers Union or any of the other guardians of the purity of Japanese education have objected at the use of the taxes which are being paid by the poor people in this country to support the education of the rich people. But in Britain, of course, the same thing happens, because although the system is well established, and although the scholarships are given on a need basis, for example, as a university professor, my salary is sufficiently high that my children would not receive any aid to go to the university. They wouldn't receive any scholarship funds for living expenses. But the fees, of course, all fees in Britain are extremely low. They're about the equivalent of some yen, 30,000 yen a year. So there's a very heavy element of subsidy. It costs the British government about £1,000 a year to educate each university student. That's the cost to the Treasury. But if one looks at the students who get to universities, particularly if you look at the social origins of the students who get to the best universities, our Tordai, Oxford and Cambridge, find that there is still an immense over-representation of the middle classes.
I see.
Because although there is equality of opportunity, in the first place, let's get this out of the way, in the first place, there is still opportunity for getting into Oxford and Cambridge by virtue of personal connections. If your father has gone to a college, then it's much easier for his son to get there. Because, you see, the selection is done on a rather haphazard basis by headmaster's reports, Naishinsho, as you call it here, and personal interviews with a certain level of academic attainment in the what's called the advanced level certificate, which would be the equivalent of a Koto Gakko Sotsugyo Shomeisho. But the level of attainment, which is the minimum required, is something which, say, 20-25% of an age group can fairly easily gain. So there is that element of patronage still, of non-meritocracy and pre-meritocracy. But even where the selection is strictly on the basis of merit, middle-class children in Britain have a much better chance of achieving that necessary level of merit, because Britain is a society in which the cultural difference between working-class homes and middle-class homes, in terms of the newspapers you read, in terms of the television programs that you watch, in terms of the conversation over the breakfast table and so on, the difference is much, much greater than it is in Japan, largely because Britain has had the experience, which Japan didn't have, of industrializing very, very slowly over 4 or 5 generations, during which the classes were quite clearly segregated. They lived in different parts of the town, they never saw each other, and there was no educational ladder joining the primary school to the middle school. There was no opportunity for social mobility between the classes for 3 or 4 generations. And for that reason, as well as, of course, there is an element of genetic determination too. There is some degree of inheritance of intelligence, so that the amount of mobility in British society is not as great as one might expect.
I see.
In spite of the financial provisions which make it possible for working class children to go to university at the expense of their parents. And of course, what is happening in British society is something that's happening in every advanced industrial society. It's gone much further in Japan than in Britain, is the increasing importance placed on university degrees and on educational certificates in general for getting jobs. The gakureki shakai phenomenon. Britain, of course, has not gone anything like as far as Japan in this respect. This is chiefly because British society developed very slowly and still preserves a lot of the old apprenticeship patterns. For example, if you want to be a professional accountant or an architect in Britain, in Japan, of course, you go to a university and take a degree in that subject. In Britain, still, most people become an apprentice. You leave school at the age of 18 and you go into an architect's office and you do subordinate jobs and you study in the evenings and you become a full architect some 5 or 6 years later.
Yes.
But gradually, university degrees are acquiring more and more importance. And as a result, I think the quality of education is declining. You spoke of the innovations of Sussex, and I was giving you a long PR commercial about the brilliant achievements of Sussex. And I think in many ways it is a better university than many others. But Sussex, like every other university, is, I think, suffering from the fact that there are more and more students who know at the university that they have got to get good marks, otherwise they will not get the kind of job that they need, and who indeed made the decision to come to the university, not because they wanted to learn about British society or to become philosophers or to understand economics, but in order to get a piece of paper that would guarantee them entry into the kinds of jobs that they want. And as the number of people who are brought to the university by those motives increases, I think the quality of education gradually declines.
I see.
So much so that the former Vice-Chancellor of Cambridge University, Eric Ashby, Lord Ashby, I think, gave a paper at a conference on higher education in Britain a couple of years ago, in which he suggested that it was necessary now to stop giving degrees in non-vocational subjects.
I see.
If you're training engineers, if you're training doctors, well, there's a certain body of knowledge which they must know, and there is still some point in certifying that they have learned it. But to use degrees in English literature or economics or sociology as means of roughly grading people's ability, so that employers can know, that this man will make a good BBC producer, or this man will make a good manager, or whatever. To use university degrees in this way is spoiling the quality of university education.
I see.
And the only way to stop it is to stop giving degrees.
I see.
To allow people to come to the university and to study as much as they like. And if you like, give them a certificate of attendance, but nothing which would enable their achievements to be used as a measure of general ability for the job market, for the labor market. I think we shall come to that. I don't think really that we shall come to it before Japan does. Maybe I think the situation is getting so bad in Japan. There is so much ritualistic education, education for the sake of nothing but the certificate in Japan, that I think the situation will get to the point at which something has to be done more quickly in Japan than it would in Britain.
So, well, thank you very much, Professor Dorr, for your very interesting remarks, and let me conclude this very brief interview by reiterating my own personal hope, which is, I'm sure, shared by a large number of the Japanese people who know you, that you will continue to be a very impartial, objective, sympathetic, and empathetic observer of Japan and the Japanese people. After all, you started out as a professional scholar on Japan, a professional student of Japan, as a consequence of the series of accidents to which you referred at the very outset. And I hope that these accidents will prove to be beneficial to us in the years ahead, especially in view of the fact that we are bound to run into a series of difficulties in the international arena, and that the advice and suggestions coming from a person of your caliber and credentials will turn out to be extremely important and helpful to us as we have to tide over the envisaged difficulties. Thank you very much again, and happy landing.
Well, thank you. Sympathy, yes, I can claim. Objectivity, I'm not so sure. Anyway, I've enjoyed talking to you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Today we have listened to what Professor Donald Dorr tells us about higher education in Great Britain. The interviewer was Mr. Masao Kunihiro. And until next time, goodbye.
For this week, this is Joanne Livingston saying goodbye.
English hour.
Kodama's other associates, one after another, including Mr. Zenichi Minami, former chief of the Hokkaido Takushoku Bank's Tsukiji branch, which is reported to be Kodama's financial manager. The Regional Tax Administration Bureau will question Kodama's other associates, one after another, including Mr. Zenichi Minami, former chief of the Hokkaido Takushoku Bank's Tsukiji branch, who is reported to be Kodama's financial manager. Prime Minister Miki has said that he expects to receive shortly a reply from U.S. President Ford to his personal message asking for cooperation in solving the Lockheed payoff case. Mr. Miki made the statement at a meeting of ministers concerned with the Lockheed case in Tokyo today. In his letter to President Ford, Mr. Miki requested that the U.S. government deliver to Japan all the materials concerning the Lockheed case, even including the names of Japanese government officials allegedly involved in the case. At the meeting, Prime Minister Miki urged his ministers to step up their efforts to uncover the truth behind the scandal. After the meeting, Justice Minister Inaba told newsmen that some of the materials which Japanese officials have obtained through their investigations may not be disclosed to ensure smooth investigations. Mr. Inaba said that these materials will be treated separately from other documents, for instance, supplied by the United States in connection with the Lockheed case. The Justice Minister recalled that all the materials provided by the United States through diplomatic channels will be published in principle unless the United States attaches specific conditions in handing them to Japan. The government has instructed its embassy in Washington to seek the approval of the U.S. government for the summoning of 3 American nationals concerning the Lockheed payoff case. Among the 3 Americans is former Lockheed Vice Chairman Mr. Carl Cochin, who revealed the payoffs in testimony before a U.S. Senate subcommittee. The other 2 are Mr. Shig Katayama, a businessman who acted as an intermediary in the alleged payoffs, and Mr. Toshiyoshi Oni, manager of the Japan branch office of the Lockheed Corporation, who is the only one among them now in Japan. The 3 will be among 9 witnesses named by the Japanese Parliament for a second round of questioning before the lower house on March 1st about the Lockheed payoffs. However, observers here believe that it would be difficult to have Mr. Cochin or Mr. Katayama come over to this country for testimony, since the projected hearing will be held in 3 days' time. The lower house steering committee will discuss the problem of creating a special committee on the Lockheed case within the House beginning on the 3rd of next month. This was decided at a meeting of steering committee directors of both camps today. The ruling Liberal Democratic Party yesterday proposed the creation of such an ad hoc committee comprising 30 members. And at today's meeting, the Democratic Socialist Party suggested that the number of committee members should be limited to 13, and that the committee should be aided by a staff of experts. But other opposition parties reserved their attitude toward the issue, pending the outcome of the Budget Committee hearing on the case scheduled for next Monday. The government has presented to Parliament a unified view on the control of arms exports, much severer than in the past. This was in reply to the opposition demand raised during debate on the controversial arms exports at the lower house Budget Committee earlier this month. The opposition questioners claimed that Prime Minister Miki's reply on the matter was contrary to the previous government policy. In the new unified view presented today, the government ruled that a total ban will be enforced on arms exports to countries covered under the so-called three-point arms shipment principle. The principle provides for a ban on arms exports to communist nations, territories to which such exports have been prohibited under United Nations resolutions, as well as areas involved in international disputes. The government also pledged that arms exports to other areas than those covered under the three principles will be restrained, and that the three principles will be applied to exports of equipment related to the arms manufacture as well. As for the definition of arms, the government explained that fighter planes, tanks, and other war vehicles can also be treated as weapons, although they are not directly intended to kill or wound people. NHK's reporters note that the latest government view on an arms export ban is more rigid than the previous one. They point to the fact that in the new view, arms exports to areas covered under the three principles have now been totally banned, instead of a ban in principle in the past, as well as the restraint of such exports even to areas not covered under the three principles. In discussing the arms shipment issue with an opposition questioner, Trade and Industry Minister Komoto said the controversial C-1 medium-range transport plane will have equipment aboard changed when it is exported, although the plane does not come under the category of arms according to the three-point principle. The government today explained to Parliament the need of floating a large amount of national bonds to finance the budget for fiscal 1976. The explanation on a special legislative bill authorizing the issuance of deficit-covering bonds was made by Finance Minister Ohida at a lower house plenary meeting. Mr. Ohida said that measures to overcome the recession and stabilize employment are the most important tasks now facing the government. However, he noted the government cannot expect much from tax revenue next year, and at the same time, increases in tax rates should be avoided. Under such circumstances, the finance minister said, the government cannot but float deficit financing bonds as a special measure for the coming fiscal year. Following Mr. Ohida, representatives of the opposition parties presented their views against the bond flotation plan, claiming that the measure involves the risk of rekindling inflation. The ruling Liberal Democratic Party had earlier scheduled to have the government explain the special bond flotation bill on Tuesday. But it was delayed until today due to resistance from the opposition camp, which insisted that priority should be given to the probe into the Lockheed case. Observers predict that it will be some time before substantial discussions start on the bond flotation bill. Consumer prices in Tokyo have gone up for the second consecutive month. The price index in Tokyo's 23 wards in February was up by 0.8% from the previous month. This represents a 10.7% boost over a year ago. The Prime Minister's office attributes the rise mainly to a 16% spiral in vegetable and fruit prices due to unusually long dry weather and a twofold increase in postal service fees. As far as Tokyo is concerned, a series of price increases scheduled for March will make it difficult for the government to fulfill its pledge to hold down the annual rate of increase to a one-digit percentage at the end of the current fiscal year on March the 31st. Kokuro, or the National Railways Workers Union, has ended a two-day special convention after adopting its action policy for this year's spring labor offensive. The action policy calls for an average 26.2% wage hike of more than 39,000 yen a month. It also calls on the railway authorities to retract the punishment meted out to those who participated in last year's strike to regain the right to strike. According to the action policy, Kokuro will launch a 24-hour strike on March 17th in areas along the Japan Sea coast. Another 24-hour strike is planned for March 30th in the Pacific coastal areas. National Railways trains in and around Tokyo and Osaka, as well as Shinkansen trains, will be included in the strike plan. A one-week strike will be staged in early April when the spring labor offensive will reach a climax. The steel companies are expected to offer wage increases to their workers around this time. Conspicuous in the convention was a policy mapped out for opposition to the drastic fare increases made in the past two consecutive years. Japan has decided to follow an international agreement which sets a floor price of $7 per barrel for imported oil. The agreement was reached at a meeting of the 18-nation International Energy Agency late last month. The main aim of the agreement is that consuming countries' dependence on cheaper imported oil should not prevent efforts for oil resources developments in those countries. Originally, Japan had been strongly opposed to the floor price system on the stand that Japan imports almost all of its oil needs. However, the government decided today to follow the international agreement, realizing that there is very little possibility of a sudden and sharp drop in crude oil prices. The floor price of $7 per barrel is said to be cheaper by some $4 than the standard price for Arabian crude oil. The government intends to increase its sources of oil imports by taking an active part in oil development programs in the developed countries such as the North Sea oil field in Britain and the Northrop oil field in Alaska. Police representatives from 34 countries have agreed in principle on closer exchanges of information on global organized crime. The agreement came on the last day of their 3-day symposium held in Paris by the International Criminal Police Organization, or Interpol, on prevention of internationally organized crime. The Japanese representative briefed the participants on the Red Army, a left-wing terrorist group, and he said their sphere of activities has become global and that it is more necessary than ever to exchange information on the moves of terrorist groups between Interpol member countries. The Japanese proposal received wide support, but the symposium reportedly refrained from discussing details of how and what information to exchange. The government has appointed new ambassadors to Algeria, Malaysia, and Papua New Guinea. Mr. Hiromichi Miyazaki, former director of the Economic Bureau of the Foreign Ministry, becomes envoy to Algeria. Mr. Eikichi Hara has been named as ambassador to Malaysia. Mr. Hara was formerly president of the Foreign Service Training Institute of the Foreign Ministry. Mr. Koichiro Yamaguchi becomes envoy to Papua New Guinea. Mr. Yamaguchi was in Toronto, Canada as Consul General. And that is the end of the news in English from NHK. This news in English can be heard every day except Sundays from 7 p.m. This news can be heard every day except Sundays from 7 p.m.
The opposition parties plan to make all-out efforts at the second Lockheed hearing to unveil the connection between Marubeni Corporation and the multi-billionaire Mr. Kenji Osano, as well as the background to the purchase of TriStar Airbuses by All Nippon Airways. The four opposition parties have respectively held conferences of their members engaged in the probe of the scandal to map out plans for the hearing on Monday. Our reporters say that the four parties will make all-out efforts to get to the bottom of the scandal, pointing out the differences in testimonies between witnesses at the last hearing, as well as presenting the information they have so far gathered through their own investigations. They intend to interrogate former President Oba and incumbent President Wakasa of All Nippon Airways on circumstances in which the airways reversed its earlier decision to buy Douglas 10 DC-10s in favor of the purchase of Lockheed TriStars. In the questionings of former Marubeni executives, Mr. Okubo and Mr. Ito, the opposition parties will grill them on the connections between Mr. Osano and their corporation, as well as All Nippon Airways, so as to disclose the role played by Mr. Osano in the deal. They suspect that Mr. Osano, side by side with aiding right-wing lobbyist Kodama, pulled the wire behind the stage. The Parliament had originally asked 3 American citizens to testify on the Lockheed payoff case before the lower house budget committee on Monday, but 2 of them rejected the request. The former vice chairman of Lockheed Aircraft Corporation, Mr. Kochan, now in Los Angeles, rejected the request, saying it has come too suddenly. And the president of ID Corporation, as well as of the United Steel Company, Mr. Shigu Katayama, told the Japanese Consulate General in Los Angeles by telephone that he'll be willing to go to Tokyo to testify, but it is difficult for him to reach Japan by Monday. Mr. Katayama said he is now on a business tour of the U.S. Midwest region and will return to Los Angeles on Sunday. And the third American who has been asked to testify on the Lockheed affair before Parliament is Mr. Toshiyoshi Oni, manager of the Japan branch of Lockheed Asia Limited Company. He is now staying in this country. The Japanese request to the Americans came after the U.S. State Department informed the Japanese embassy in Washington that it has no objection to these Americans testifying on the Lockheed affair in the Japanese Parliament. At the same time, the U.S. State Department said the U.S. government is not in a position to ask these Americans to go to Tokyo for that purpose, and that the Japanese government should ascertain their intention in an appropriate manner. The government has started its investigation in the controversial issue concerning the selection of the next type of anti-submarine patrol aircraft in connection with the Lockheed payoff case. The investigation is being conducted after the opposition parties continuously grilled the government on the matter in Parliament. The opposition parties suspect that late in 1972, following the Japan-U.S. summit talks in Hawaii, the then Prime Minister, Mr. Tanaka, and other top government officials canceled the earlier plan to domestically produce anti-submarine patrol aircraft and decided on the import of such aircraft from abroad. And as a result, it was generally believed that Japan may import Lockheed's P-3C as the next anti-submarine patrol aircraft for the self-defense forces. The opposition parties suspect that the virtual decision on the import might have been influenced by Mr. Yoshio Kodama. He was the secret agent of the American firm in Japan. The defense agency denies the opposition party's suspicion. Deputy Prime Minister Fukuda says that the ruling Liberal Democratic Party should reflect on the so-called money politics in connection with the Lockheed case. Speaking at the lower house budget committee meeting today, Mr. Fukuda, who is also the leader of a faction of the ruling party, said politicians, particularly Liberal Democrats, should hold themselves responsible for the cause of the money politics. Mr. Fukuda also said elections for the ruling party president or virtually prime minister, in which much money is allegedly used, played a role in intensifying the money politics. He made these remarks in reply to a socialist member who criticized the government and the ruling party on the Lockheed payoff case. Justice Minister Inaba told the same committee meeting that it is natural for the prosecutors to investigate into the alleged bribe-taking by government officials. He noted that the people's attention is being focused on whether or not such bribery by Lockheed Corporation really took place. In reply to the same socialist questioner, both Deputy Prime Minister Fukuda and Finance Minister Ohira admitted that they have known Mr. Yoshio Kodama, but they denied any political relationship with Mr. Kodama. Also at the lower house budget committee, Deputy Prime Minister Fukuda said he is convinced that Japan will be able to achieve a real 5 to 6% economic growth in fiscal 1976. Mr. Fukuda attributed the favorable outlook to the possibility of more than expected increase in exports, an 8% increase in public work investments, and a steady increase in consumer spending. In Seattle, Washington, the regional administrator of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission says it will soon begin examination of Boeing Aircraft Company's books. A federal judge in Washington, D.C. ordered Boeing on February the 20th to produce records the commission had subpoenaed a month earlier as part of the investigation of payoffs the firm may have made for overseas sales. Boeing has denied any wrongdoings either overseas or domestically, but it has said it will comply fully with the subpoenas and the investigation. The regional administrator of the Securities and Exchange Commission said the need to handle other matters has delayed the start of the Boeing records examination, but it will be started soon. The leader of Jansen Dome, or the National Federation of Textile Workers Unions, has stressed the need to win a more than 10% raise in wages in the upcoming spring labor offensive. In an opening speech of a meeting of Jansen Dome's Central Committee in Ikeda near Osaka today, the Federation President, Mr. Usami, urged the necessity to secure wage increases of over one-digit figure in rate to defend the livelihood of textile workers. Mr. Usami criticized the business leaders' policy to hold down wage hikes this year below 10%. He said such a theory would cause a delay in recovery of business in Japan. The Central Committee of Jansen Dome later decided to demand a wage hike by an average 14.4%, including automatic annual increase, as well as to bring its wage struggle to climax in the middle of April. A substructure for Nikkeiren, or the Federation of Employers Associations, has replied to the Joint Spring Labor Struggle Committee for the Tokyo region that it does not have any intention of retracting Nikkeiren's guideline for wage increases. Nikkeiren announced that the wage increases this spring should not exceed 10% at most. The Joint Spring Labor Struggle Committee called on the Association of Employers in the Kanto district the day before yesterday to have Nikkeiren's guideline retracted because it was an intervention in matters to be decided between management and labor. The substructure for Nikkeiren today replied to the committee that it cannot change its stand in view of the need to maintain employment in the current recession. This stand directly opposes the position of labor, which maintains that it is necessary to carry out two-digit hike to expand consumer spending for the sake of business recovery. Our reporter, however, says that President Sakurada of Nikkeiren recently told leaders of Dome, or the Confederation of Labor, that enterprises may raise wages of their employees by more than 10% if they are in a position to do so. Mr. Sakurada said Nikkeiren's guideline was issued because enterprises would run the risk of business failure if they raise wages beyond their ability. Warm weather has prevailed throughout the country as the mercury rose this morning 7 to 11 degrees higher than normal. The weather, as warm as late April, caused snow to melt at the skiing site in Sapporo, spoiling the condition for the competition now underway. It also caused plum flowers to bloom fully at the Yushima Tenjin Shrine in Tokyo. But the warm weather brought rains to Kyushu, Shikoku, Tokai, and other areas, making it impossible, to the great disappointment of baseball lovers, for 8 professional baseball teams to carry out planned exhibition games. Weather officials have predicted rainy weather for tomorrow across the country. Moreover, according to the Meteorological Agency, a second typhoon of the year has been spawned in the Pacific off Guam Island. Packing maximum central winds of 20 meters per second, the typhoon is moving in a west-northwesterly direction at a speed of 15 kilometers per hour. For the present, however, the typhoon is not likely to approach the Japanese archipelago. Japan will ask the Soviet Union to call off the scheduled launching of its weather observation rockets from sites close to commercial air routes in northern Pacific. The Soviet Union plans to launch meteorological experimental rockets from 9 different sites in the area between late this month and mid-March. The Japanese government points out that 2 of the 9 rocket launching sites are too close to Japanese commercial flight routes. The request will be made shortly to the Soviet government through the Japanese embassy in Moscow. Now, to end the news, here are the main points again. Only 5 persons will appear as witnesses at the hearing on the Lockheed case in the Lower House Budget Committee on Monday. The government has started its investigation in the controversial issue concerning the selection of the next type of anti-submarine patrol aircraft in connection with the Lockheed payoff case. The leader of Jensen Dome of the National Federation of Textile Workers Unions has stressed the need to win a more than 10% raise in wages in the upcoming spring labor offensive. That's the end of the news in English from NHK. Your reporter today was Seiso Tamaru.
俗基礎英語安田一郎先生とジャン・マケーレブさん、マーシャ・クラッカワーさんです。
Hi, friends.
Hello, everybody.
Let's review the 39th week's lessons.
それでは今日の勉強を始めましょう。今日は第39週の復習をします。今週の勉強は第38週からの引き続きとしまして、受け身の形をした言い回しというのが中心になっていました。普通受け身という場合は能動の形と受動の形というようにペアになっているわけですから、能動の形で言うのがちょっと都合の悪いような場合、例えば誰がというのが漠然としているような場合に受け身の形を使うわけなんですが、今週取り上げました受け身のような場合は能動の形というのをほとんど意識しないで、初めからそういった受け身の形をしている言い回し、こういうものとして使っていけるような材料を取り上げたわけなんですね。まず A のところから復習に入りましょう。これは be supposed to 何々という受け身の形で何々することになっているとか何々する予定ですと、こういうような意味に使われる材料ですね。本来この suppose という動詞は想像するという意味の動詞ですから、それが受け身になれば be supposedという形で意味も想像されるとなるわけですが、それが少し変化しまして発音も supposed から supposed とこういうふうに変わりまして be supposed to 何々の形で何々することになっていると、こういうような一種の順序動詞のような働きをしているわけですね。まず転換練習をしていきましょう。 I'm supposed to speak for 5 minutes。私は5分間話をすることになっていますという文が変わります。最初ですからお手本をつけてもらいましょう。
I'm supposed to speak for 5 minutes. Repeat.
I'm supposed to speak for 5 minutes.
Wants them, so it fulfills a very important emotional need.
It certainly does. Well, I hope we can get more guide dogs in Japan, too, to help all these poor people who are walking around with white canes.
Well, I'm sure that when the public appreciate the value of dogs, then the support will be forthcoming. But the organizations in Japan do need the support of the public. They have a great growth potential, and with the support, I have met the trainers in Japan who are very keen, very enthusiastic.
Yes.
And I would hope when I go away that I can feel that they are going to get the support to enable them to expand their activities, which will be a great benefit to the blind people of Japan.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us today, Mr. Phillipson.
Well, thank you.
And come again.
Thank you.
Well, friends, what do you think about that? Maybe next time when we see a blind person, we can just go up to them and say, "Can I help you?" That's all. You can say it in Japanese or in English, but it's really nice to know that someone cares. Okay? So that's about all for today. See you then. Bye-bye.
Time. Nobody leave and nobody else come in, okay? Just mix up. Good. Okay, now everybody keep mixing and we'll see how many people there are. Oh, they're mixing every which way. Now hold still so we'll count you again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now wait, let's subtract 1 from 7 and we have 6. Now we have 6 people on the steps. Now we subtract 1 from 6 and we get 5. There are 5 people on the steps. How about that? Now 5 take away 1 leaves 4 people sitting on the steps. And 4 people take away 1 leaves 3 people on the steps of 123 Sesame Street. Now take away 1 more. There's 2. 1 from 3 is 2. Now take away 1 more. And there's 1 person on the front steps. Now take away 1 more person, and that leaves nobody. Nobody sitting on the steps of 123 Sesame Street.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
I don't know what to call this game because my daughter simply started it one day when we were riding down the road and we were getting bored, and she suddenly said, I see a long white thread that's gone in and out with a sewing machine, must have been a giant sewing machine. And I looked around until I saw the dotted line in the middle of the road. So that started it off. And we figured that wherever you are, you could look at something. For example, I see right now a giant donut.
A tire.
Okay, what do you see? What do you see? Who sees something?
I see
What do you see?
little bricks.
Little...
Little bricks. That is rectangle.
I see him. Lots of them. What do you see?
I see a skinny man with a flat head and 3 legs at the table.
Yeah, I see a skinny man with a flat head and 3 legs. I see an apple sitting on a square tray.
Ooh, I know.
Where's that?
Basketball. I see an O right over there.
A giant's O.
I see little midgets down there.
Are we all midgets?
No,
Midgets? Where do you see them?
I don't see no midgets. All of you, because we're up here. Hi, so you look like midgets. Oh, I see something. I see snakes.